Hey, welcome back to session 3. I'm so glad you're with us and you are halfway through. So congratulations. Today we're going to talk about taking the next step, building on what we've talked about the last 2 days. So your purpose is clear for groups. You know why you have groups in your church and what they're supposed to accomplish. That was day 1. And then now you've got your senior pastor engaged, right? Your senior pastor is going to make curriculum based on pastor's teaching. And the pastor is going to be the one to champion small groups and invite people to lead. We're going to get there, right? But that's the way we're headed. Now, what are you asking for? What exactly are you looking for? You see, to have a group, you need a leader, right? So who are you looking for? What does a leader look like? Now, often when we look for leaders, we get into what I call the leader recruiting dilemma. And I don't know about you, but I've had more than one conversation that went exactly like this. I'd say, you should lead a group. And the response was, sorry, I'm not a leader. Well, at least you could join the leader training. I mean, like, why? I already told you, I'm not a leader. Have you ever had a conversation like that? You see, most people don't see themselves as being any kind of a leader. And if you need, qualified leaders to start a group, then you get caught into the dilemma because, you have to invite them to get qualified. And then once they're qualified, they can lead a group. And I did that for a long time. I picked what I thought were the best and brightest people that I knew, people that I trusted, people that I thought, boy, they have the right stuff. And I would invite them into a training group. We'd spend 6 weeks together. At the end of 6 weeks, the expectation was they would go out and they would start their own group. Well, some years I started 10. Some years I started 2. 1 year I started 0. And that's the way that it went. And it went very, very slowly. So are you caught in this dilemma? You're inviting people to lead and you think that they have the stuff, but they don't think they have the stuff and they don't consider themselves to be any kind of a leader? That's a tough place to be in. So let's talk about why we get there and maybe how we can get out of that. So what are your requirements to lead a group? What does your church require for people to lead a group? It could be things like, well, they're breathing. Breathing is good. Confession of faith, baptism, church membership, new leader briefing, an interview. Maybe they have to have a coach. Maybe they have some sort of basic leader training first. Maybe they have to apprentice in a group first and learn how to do it. Maybe they need to master divinity. Maybe all of the above. You see, the higher the requirements, the fewer leaders that you're going to end up with. But on the other side, the fewer the requirements, well, the greater risk that you're going to take. And so you have to kind of arrive at this. What is your church leadership's acceptable level of risk? And I worked with churches. Some people said, hey, if they're willing, if they're breathing, we'll take them. We'll let them get started. Other people said, well, they need to be a member of our church. They need to go through our growth track before they can lead a group, which is fine. You can recruit leaders in any of those ways. But what's your acceptable level of risk? One church said, well, in order to be a leader in our church, you need to be a member. And I thought, oh, good grief. I'm not going to start 50 groups in this church. I said, well, how many members do you have? And they said, well, we have 7,000 members. I said, you know what? I can work with that. So let's talk about a leader recruiting reset in our small group reset. Who are you recruiting? Who? Let's look at what the Bible says. When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Now, what did Jesus say? Who did Jesus say to pray for the Lord of the harvest to send? Did he say leaders? Did he say elders? Did he say highly qualified individuals? He said workers. So let's reframe what we're looking for. Why have we made forming groups so complicated? Well, here are the reasons why I made it complicated. Number one, I didn't want any problems. So if you wanted to lead a group in my church, I didn't care about that. What I cared about is, did I know you? Did you have some level of maturity? Did I believe that you weren't going to cause me any problems? Then I would handpick those and they would lead groups in my church. And if I didn't know you, you did not lead a group in my church because I did not want to have any problems, which led to the second one. I didn't want to be blamed. I didn't want to put somebody in a role of leadership and then all of a sudden it comes back on me. Well, you're the one that let him lead a group. I didn't want to be blamed. I didn't want to have any problems. And the result was that after 7 years, only 30% of our adults were connected into groups after 7 years of very hard work. And we were stuck. So who are you recruiting? Jesus' answer was workers. You see, disciples make disciples. That's the goal here, is making disciples. The Great Commission we talked about on the first day, said go and make disciples. He did say go and make small groups, didn't say go and make leaders. Jesus said go and make disciples. So what do you need to make a disciple? Well, you need a disciple to make a disciple. And how do you know if you're making disciples? Well, disciples are making disciples. So if they're a disciple, they're going to be making disciples. And that's what we need in a group. A group is a tool to make disciples. A group is not an entity unto itself. We have a mission, and that is to make disciples. The word leader gets in the way because most people don't see themselves as being any kind of a leader. And on the other hand, we should have a very high standard for leadership in the church. And the Bible talks about that. So I'm not saying have fewer qualifications to call people a leader. I'm just saying, do we need to call them a leader? Do we need a leader in order to have a group? Or do we go back to what Jesus said and pray for the Lord of the harvest to send workers? And worker is different than leader. Now, sometimes we've changed the language and we've said host instead of leader. This was what came about in the first 40 Days of Purpose in 2002. We were inviting people to host a group instead of lead a group. And for those of us who've used that, it worked very, very well for a while. Now, if you've been saying host for, almost 20 years, well, the problem is the jig is up. People know when you say host, you just mean leader. If you've never used the word host, feel free to use the word host. It works really, really well. So what am I getting at? Well, let me give you a little bit of analogy, and then we'll get to our point. Have you ever bought a car at a dealership? See, when you buy a car at a dealership or you lease a car, you go in, before you can drive that car home, there is a ton of paperwork to fill out. You have to fill out paperwork for the dealership, and you have to fill out your registration, and if you're, taking out a loan or you're leasing the car, you got to fill out paperwork for all of that, and then they try to get you to get the extended warranty, and you got to fill out paperwork for that, and by the time you're done filling out all of this paperwork, you have like a cramp in your hand, and you need to have like a healing service, right? That's to take the car home. But before you take the car home, usually they ask you to take a test drive. Now, what's required to take a test drive? You don't have to fill out all of this paperwork to take a test drive, but what's the requirement for a test drive? This is not a complicated question. The requirement for a test drive is a driver's license. So you have a driver's license, you can take a test drive for the car, and you can decide whether or not you want to take that car home, but you get that test drive first. So what is your church's driver's license? If you want to give somebody a test drive at doing a group, someone who doesn't feel like they're a leader, but maybe they would get together with their friends and do a study, what is your driver's license? What is your minimum requirement? So going back to our list, breathing, a confession of faith, baptism, church membership, a new leader briefing, an interview, a coach, basic leader training, apprenticing first, a master of divinity, all of the above. So what is your driver's license? You see, we want to eliminate the risk and we want to increase the reward here. So how do we do this? We determine, okay, if you're willing, if you're breathing, we're going to let you do a test drive. If you're a member, if you've been through our growth track, we'll let you do a test drive. Whatever our driver's license is, and you have to decide that for yourself. I'm not going to tell you what your driver's license should be. But this is how we eliminate the risk and increase the reward. First of all, we offer something that's short term. It's a test drive. So we offer them a short-term opportunity, not the rest of their life, maybe 6 weeks with an easy-to-use video-based curriculum that your pastor created, right? Short-term, unadvertised group. Because if these are quote-unquote unqualified leaders, we're not going to put them on the website. We're not going to send people to these groups. We're not going to advertise them in any way. They're not going to be at our connection event, because once we publicize this group, then it gives kind of an implied endorsement that the church is behind the group, and we may not even really know who these leaders are. So short-term, unadvertised groups of friends. You see, people are already in groups. They're in a family, that's a group. They have a group of friends, they have a group of neighbors, they have a group of coworkers, they have a group of people that they do volunteering with, they have a group of people that they serve with, they have a group of people that they hang out with. People are already in groups. So we just need to give them something intentional to do about their spiritual growth, and then draw a circle around them and say, you're a group, right? So short-term, unadvertised groups of friends. And if they can gather a group of friends, they have more leadership ability than they give themselves credit for. You see, there's a problem with the idea of lowering the bar. And that is, it's like it dilutes our leadership standard. And the other side of it is, it makes it feel too easy. So while we want an easy entry point, if we communicate over and over again that this is just, it's easy. What it means is it's not important. What it means is it's not meaningful. It's too easy. So I threw away this term of lowering the bar. But on the other hand, we don't want to raise the bar so high that nobody's qualified to lead. As my friend Randall Alquist at Vertical Church said, we're not recruiting elders here. We're not recruiting elders. So we don't want to lower the bar. We're not recruiting elders. So where do we land? We want to delay the requirements. So you have your driver's license. They're breathing. They're willing. They made a confession of faith. They're a member. Whatever driver's license you want to choose, they start there. And then we need to see this as the first step in a leadership development process. See, then we bring back the requirements later on, because the truth is, if you keep the bar too low for too long, this strategy will come back to bite you. What? I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth. You give them an easy entry point to get started, confessed, avowed non-leaders are gathering a group. They're showing that they have more leadership ability than they do. John Maxwell says leadership is influence. So if they can gather a group, they have some influence, right? So they have leadership. And then from there, you bring them along. And you kind of turn up the temperature on their leadership. And before they know it, it'll be like a guy named Doug in our church said to me one day. He said, "Thank you, Pastor Allen, for showing me that I was the leader I never knew that I was." That is probably the best compliment that anybody has ever paid me. And I know that you've got those Dougs in your church as well. Paul said to Timothy, "Do not be hasty in the laying on of hands." What does that mean? If it's somebody that you don't know, they have no experience, they're unproven, you don't want to call them a leader. You want to be stingy with the term leader, right? But once they've taken the trial run, they move into another series, you give them a little training, you're coaching them along the way, you're developing them, they've proven themselves as a leader, then you can say, okay, you're a leader. But don't be hasty. Someone must prove themselves before you can call them a leader. So what is proving themselves? Well, maybe it's training and interviews. You know, you could vet them forever. But maybe it's actually leading and seeing if they've got the stuff, seeing if they have what it takes, seeing if they have the relational ability. You could train the skills, but you can't give them a heart transplant. Maybe it's actually leading with a coach for a period of time, and then once they meet all the qualifications, then you could say, okay, now you're a leader. So here's the assignment I want to give you today, is I want you to get with your leadership and think about what is the driver's license for your church. So out of all of those requirements, what is the minimum requirement to do a test drive, unadvertised, short-term, with their friends to see if they have what it takes to lead a group? So what is the driver's license for your church? And let's talk about this in the Facebook group. I'll be on there and can interact with you. But I'd love to hear what your driver's license is. And then tomorrow, we're going to talk about getting people into groups that last. Because we've moved heaven and earth to get people into groups before, but not all of those groups lasted. So how do we get people into groups that will actually last? Check your email. Love to hear from you tomorrow. Interact with us on the Facebook group. Love to see you there. All right. God bless. Have a great day.